The stage is dimly lit. A single spotlight cuts through the haze, landing on a man with tired eyes and a knowing smile. For years, he made millions laugh. But behind the laughter was something deeper: anger, honesty, and compassion. This isn't just a story about jokes or television. It's about a man who dared to speak truth in an age of noise, a comedian who became the conscience of a nation. Before Jon Stewart was the fearless host of The Daily Show, he was just a restless kid from New Jersey, trying to make sense of a broken world through humor. But how did that boy become one of the most trusted voices in American media? And what price did he pay for it? From comedy clubs to Congress, from laughter to tears, this is the journey of a man who turned satire into a weapon of truth, and in the process, taught us that sometimes the funniest people carry the heaviest truths. Before the world knew him as Jon Stewart, he was Jonathan Stewart Leibowitz, a quiet, sharp-eyed boy growing up in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Born in 1962 to a teacher mother and a physics professor father, Jon's early years were marked by intelligence, curiosity, and conflict. His parents' divorce when he was just 11 left a wound that would never fully heal. The absence of his father and the tension of a fractured home shaped Jon's outlook on the world. He learned early that humor could be armor, that laughter could turn pain into something bearable. He often spoke of feeling like an outsider, a Jewish kid in suburban America, navigating between intellect and insecurity. At school, he wasn't the class clown, he was the observer, watching, studying, storing away the absurdity of everyday life. His mother, Marion, worked tirelessly to raise her sons, teaching them empathy and independence. She became the moral anchor of his young life, the source of both discipline and compassion. From her, Jon learned two things that would define his career: to question authority and to care deeply about truth. As he grew older, anger mixed with idealism. He studied psychology at the College of William and Mary, searching for answers about human behavior. But deep down he already knew. He didn't just want to understand people, he wanted to make them feel. Those childhood fractures, that emotional distance, would one day become his greatest strength. Because in a world full of lies, only someone who had seen pain up close could recognize honesty when he found it. In the mid-1980s, New York City pulsed with raw energy. The smell of cigarettes, neon lights, and the restless laughter of underground comedy clubs. Jon Stewart was there, standing in the back of dingy rooms, waiting for his name to be called. Every night was a test. He wasn't the loudest comic nor the wildest, but his humor had something rare: honesty. His jokes weren't just punchlines, they were small truths wrapped in sarcasm. He talked about politics, hypocrisy, the absurdity of human behavior, and the audiences, though small, began to listen. But it wasn't easy. For years he lived on the edge, sleeping on couches, doubting himself, wondering if his voice would ever matter. Comedy was his refuge, but also his battlefield. Every rejection, every silent crowd hardened his resolve. Then came The Jon Stewart Show on MTV in 1993. A quirky, late-night experiment. It was sharp, funny, and ahead of its time. The critics loved it, but MTV didn't know what to do with a show that made people think. It was canceled after just 2 years. For most, that would have been the end. But for Jon, it was the beginning. He had finally found his medium, the intersection between humor and honesty, laughter and conscience. Guest hosting gigs followed. The Late Late Show, Larry Sanders' late-night appearances where he honed his craft. He wasn't just telling jokes anymore, he was dissecting society with precision. Hollywood saw him as the next Letterman. But Jon wasn't chasing fame. He was searching for purpose. And soon that purpose would find him. In the most unlikely place, a small Comedy Central program no one took seriously. A show that would change both his life and American television forever. It was 1999, the dawn of a new millennium. America was changing, the media landscape shifting. And into that chaos stepped Jon Stewart, the unlikely heir to a late-night satire that few were watching. The Daily Show, once a goofy comedy experiment, suddenly had a new voice, one sharper, wiser, and infinitely more human. At first, no one expected much, but Jon did. He saw the absurdity of politics, the emptiness of cable news, and the hunger of a generation searching for truth amid noise. Night after night, he transformed that tiny studio into a pulpit of wit and conscience, where humor wasn't an escape, but a weapon. Then came September 11th, 2001. The jokes stopped. The laughter died. When The Daily Show returned, Jon's trembling voice broke through tears as he spoke, not as a comedian, but as a human being. That night, America saw his heart. And from that moment, The Daily Show wasn't just funny. It mattered. Over the next decade, Stewart became a cultural force. He exposed hypocrisy with surgical precision, turning absurdity into accountability. He confronted politicians, grilled pundits, and challenged media spin, all under the banner of comedy. Clips went viral before viral even existed. College students tuned in not for jokes, but for clarity. In an age of cynicism, Jon Stewart became something no comedian had ever been before: trusted. And then came his defining moment: the infamous Crossfire confrontation in 2004. Sitting across from CNN's political hosts, Stewart dismantled them live on air, declaring, "You're hurting America." It wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. But it became legendary. The show was canceled soon after, and Stewart's credibility skyrocketed. By the late 2000s, The Daily Show was no longer a comedy show. It was a mirror held up to America, and the man behind the desk had become its moral compass, proving that sometimes the truth can be the funniest thing of all. For over 15 years, Jon Stewart sat behind the desk of The Daily Show, wielding wit like a scalpel, dissecting hypocrisy, exposing lies, and giving laughter to a weary world. But beneath the applause, the burden was growing heavier. Every night, he was expected to make sense of chaos, to turn outrage into humor, tragedy into punchlines. The world was changing faster than comedy could keep up, and Jon began to wonder if the laughter was still healing anything at all. Critics, once his allies, started turning on him. Some accused him of bias, that his satire favored one side, that he'd become part of the very media machine he mocked. Others said he had grown too angry, too serious, too powerful for a comedian. It wore on him. The endless cycle of outrage, the politics of performance, the pressure to be both clown and conscience. Behind the scenes, exhaustion crept in. Quiet, invisible, relentless. By 2015, the decision was made. One final show. One final night under the lights. He smiled, joked, thanked his team, and walked off stage. Into silence. To the world, it looked like a graceful exit. But to Jon, it was something more complicated. A retreat from a world that had become too loud, too cruel, too cynical. He wasn't running from fame. He was running toward something simpler, something real. For the first time in decades, there were no cameras, no monologues, no applause. Just a man, finally free from the noise, yet haunted by the question, did it change anything? When the studio lights dimmed and the applause faded, Jon Stewart disappeared. No more desk, no more headlines, just quiet, the kind he hadn't felt in decades. For a time, he withdrew completely. He bought a farm in New Jersey with his wife, Tracy, surrounded by rescued animals and open skies. The man who once dissected the world's chaos now found peace in simplicity, mending fences instead of broken politics. But silence didn't mean surrender, because while the cameras were gone, Jon's conscience wasn't. In the years that followed, he returned, not to comedy, but to cause. He became the loudest advocate for 9/11 first responders, demanding Congress provide health care and benefits for those who risked everything. His impassioned testimony on Capitol Hill, raw, furious, heartbroken, reminded everyone why his voice mattered. They did their jobs. "Now do yours," he told lawmakers, his eyes blazing with the same truth that once shook late-night television. It wasn't a performance. It was purpose. Jon also turned his attention to veterans, equality, and justice reform, using influence not to entertain, but to fight. He no longer needed laughter to make people listen. And in 2021, he returned once more with The Problem with Jon Stewart, a quieter, more reflective version of himself. Gone was the satirical edge. In its place, compassion and clarity. He wasn't chasing relevance. He was amplifying reality. Jon Stewart had evolved from a comedian into something greater, a moral compass in an age of confusion. A man who learned that the real punchline is truth. Jon Stewart didn't just redefine comedy, he redefined truth. Before him, late night was about laughter. After him, it became a platform for accountability. The Daily Show turned from a quirky news parody into a cultural institution, one that shaped how a generation understood the world. His influence spread far beyond his own stage. Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, Samantha Bee, Hassan Minhaj, all carried pieces of his legacy. Each one, in their own way, continued the mission he began: to make people laugh and think. Journalists admired him for saying what they couldn't. Politicians feared him for exposing what they hid, and audiences loved him because he never spoke down to them, only with them. Underneath the satire, there was always sincerity, a yearning for honesty in a world addicted to spin. Even those who disagreed with him respected his conviction. He wasn't perfect, and he never pretended to be, but he was authentic. And that, in modern media, was revolutionary. Years after his departure, reruns of The Daily Show still resonate. His words echo across college classrooms, newsrooms, and comedy stages. Jon Stewart didn't just leave a mark, he built a movement that proved humor can be protest, laughter can be power, and truth, no matter how uncomfortable, can still make us smile. For decades, Jon Stewart lived in the noise, the lights, the cameras, the constant hum of public expectation. But when all of that faded, something unexpected emerged. Peace. Away from the headlines, he rediscovered himself. Not as a host, not as a symbol, but as a husband, a father, a friend. On his quiet New Jersey farm, surrounded by rescued animals and laughter that wasn't scripted, he found what he had been searching for all along: balance. He often spoke about the need for humility, about how fame can distort truth as easily as power does. In one interview, he said, "The hardest thing isn't speaking truth to power. It's staying kind while doing it." Jon's philosophy evolved. He no longer measured success by applause or ratings, but by compassion, by the small moments when empathy triumphed over cynicism. His humor softened. His words grew warmer. He began mentoring younger comedians, supporting causes quietly, helping others find their own voices. Through it all, he came to realize that laughter was never the goal. It was the bridge, a way to connect, to comfort, to heal. In a world where outrage sells and division dominates, Jon Stewart became something rare, a man content with less attention, but deeper meaning. He no longer needed to shout to be heard, because the truth, his truth, was already echoing in others. The lights fade. The chair behind the desk is empty now, but the echoes remain. Of laughter, of truth, of a voice that reminded us to care. Jon Stewart never wanted to be a hero. He never asked to be the conscience of a nation. He only wanted to understand the world, and help us understand it too, one joke at a time. In a culture drowning in noise, he proved that honesty still matters, that empathy can coexist with intelligence, that comedy, at its best, is not an escape from reality. It's a reflection of it. His legacy isn't measured in awards or ratings, but in the millions who learned to think critically, to question power, and to never confuse cynicism with wisdom. Jon Stewart's greatest punchline was never a joke. It was compassion, because the truth, when spoken with heart, can change everything. And so his story ends where it began, with one man, one voice, and the courage to ask, what kind of world do we want to laugh in? Call to action. If you believe that laughter can still tell the truth, Then keep listening, keep laughing, and keep questioning. That's how we stay human.